Albatross here, but before we start the show, we just wanted to take a second to remind everyone about the Bugbear PI Kickstarter done by the fantastic cartoonist and our great buddy Stan. It is an urban fantasy, hard-boiled detective story that will be told over 10 illustrated chapters sent in the mail. You can see what they look like right here. But yeah, the last day for the Kickstarter is February 15th, so be sure to check it out at newsstandproject.com to see more and show some support for an awesome artist, writer, and just an all-around cool dude. But yeah, well, with that being said, let's go on to the show. So we got our usual boys here from the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. We have Dean, or Alpha Dean. Sorry, I'm getting caught up on my words here. And just as a quick reminder, if you haven't already, be sure to follow and subscribe on both Twitch and YouTube. It'll really help us out immensely. But after all that, Dean, what are we doing here tonight?
So today we're going to talk about the top 10 house rules in the Cypher system. And these were chosen from across our members, across Cypher Unlimited social media, all the way around, so that's Facebook, Discord, so on and so forth. Some of these rules we've used ourselves, others are new to us, so this should be a great conversation. But before I have Anthony take it away, I just want to let everybody know that one of our good friends, Jethrick from the server, also is going to have Sean K. Reynolds on Dungeons and Toast Club on the 11th, which is just a few days away. So if you can take the time to, check that out, Sean K. Reynolds is going to be there. Jethrick is a great guy.
What time is it going to be?
Oh, 7 p.m. I'm sorry. It's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time.
Unless it's a 24-hour stream.
No, it's 7 p.m. Eastern. Good catch, Anthony. See, look at it. We're all stumbling around.
Not
today.
Eastern, PST.
PST specific time, so that's 10 o'clock Eastern time.
I have the information in the chat there, along with a link to a tweet about the event, so you can go ahead and check out more info about it. And there's another link for it there too.
And
so with all that being said, I'm going to pass it over, Anthony. Without further ado, let's get this thing started.
All right, guys, it's another top 10 list. It seems like every time we do a top 10 list, it's either ends up in controversy or me and Dean fighting. So this is obviously going to be a good show. So today's top 10 list is top 10 house rules in Cypher System. I want to just give a special thank you and shout out to everyone that participated in our survey. Like always, you guys always blow us away with, every time we ask for help, the CU community is always there, ready, willing, and able, and we truly appreciate it. Whether it was on Twitter, Facebook, or of course the Cypher Unlimited Discord group, you guys gave us some phenomenal suggestions. And like Dean said, some of them we've used before, some of them we never heard of before, sound intriguing. So, we wanted to compile a list of the 10 of what I thought were the most interesting, plus the ones that were mentioned by several different people, because I figured that that's a common house rule. So for the sake of this discussion, and before we start off, I just wrote down a couple of discussion points, that we should be asking ourselves about these house rules to see if they're viable for, most gaming tables. So the first question I think we should be asking ourselves, and if there's another question, guys, that I didn't put in the notes, feel free to jump in and let us know if it makes sense here, we'll add it. But the first question I put in is this house rule game breaking in any way? And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Is the rule, gonna F up things over the course of a game? The second rule I put in was, does this rule add anything to the overall experience that normally isn't present in the game? That one's also pretty explanatory. And the last rule, and I think is the most important rule, is this rule fun? Because if it isn't fun or enjoyable for everyone, then why the hell you got it in there in the first place? So, without further ado, let's get started. Who wants to read the first rule, or you want me to read it?
I could go with the first one, or Anthony, yeah, go for it.
So number 10 on our top 10 list of house rules is Cypher System. This one was submitted by Jeff Patterson on our Facebook group, and his rule is players can pass 2 XP to another player at the table instead of keeping one and sharing out one if they so choose. But His rule is both XP must be passed in this manner to the same player. So what do you guys think of this house rule?
It's interesting. It's one I had not heard of before. One thing I will say though, that it does feel like a really nice optional rule to have at a table. You know, should one person be burning XP faster than another, you might have someone who's doing player intrusions or just having horrible luck on their rolls. So it kind of takes some of the pressure off the GM to provide an intrusion for that person specifically repeatedly to replenish their XP. Now someone with their intrusion just give both to this person who's been kind of screwed over by their dice rolls for the session. So it kind of is a nice rule. I dig it.
I'm relatively meh about it. I mean, I don't think it breaks the game in any way or anything like that. I just kind of like the idea that the love gets spread around the table. So it's not a rule that I would, it's not a rule that I would readily, implement unless the group wanted me to implement something like that. But that would be like one of those rules that I would just put up in front of the group and ask, hey, what do you guys think? Is this something that will work for you? So on and so forth.
I think this is one of the rules that fits into our number 2 category. Does it add anything to the overall experience? What I think it adds bargaining. I kind of, like, I never thought of this rule. Like, it never occurred to me to do this. So, like, I don't know. I agree with you, Dean. That I don't know if this necessarily, like is needed in any way, or but I do think it can add to the fun and can add a different experience, because I think that it's gonna, instead of people getting screwed over by bad rolls, I think that it makes XP like a bargaining chip. Like if the other players are seeing that one person is exceptional at their role playing for the scene or whatever, it allows them to reward them for good play. It also allows the players to make deals behind the table, like away from the GM, as in, hey, look, if you do this in character, next time I get an intrusion, I'm giving you both my XP. Like side deals, if that makes any sense.
That's a thought process. I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. Like I said, as a GM, that would be something that I would probably put on the table for the players to decide. For me to make that type of decision, I mean,
I think that it's worth stating that, Dean. That's a good point. It's worth stating that any house rule that should be implemented that is outside of the realm of what the core book allows should be discussed first with the
table.
With the table. So I think that rule that would apply to every one of these rules.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Most definitely.
So I think it's interesting. I put it on there because when I saw this on Facebook, it never occurred to me. So I thought this was a really cool house rule to talk about, because it never occurred to me to do this. And I don't think it's game breaking. I wouldn't be upset if someone had this rule in their game.
Right.
It isn't something that I would veto. So yeah, I think it's a creative house rule.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say I was going to move on to the next one, but if you got something else to add to that.
No, I was just going to say it's definitely one I've never heard of before, so it's nice that it's on the list, because now more people will have heard of it, and maybe it might fit their game dynamic, and that's kind of what I was hoping for we'd go for with this video, where maybe people might learn new stuff to include in their games, which again is already the case for me with number 10. Never heard of this one before, so it's very nice.
There's like 4 of them on this list that I never heard before until I started compiling this list in the first place. So I definitely learned something for sure.
Absolutely.
So who wants to do number 9?
I'll do 9. Flavor abilities do not permanently remove a type option or allow everyone to get a free flavor ability to help with character concept. So
who submitted this, Dean?
Submitted by Andrew Marlowe, and he put it on our Facebook page as well. So our good buddy over at Marlowe House. What I'd like to say about this, now this one I kind of like, because you know what? Character creation is always is a sweet spot. So the idea of allowing everyone a free flavor ability to help with character concept really appeals to me. I don't think it breaks the game in any way, because I think as long as you're on the same sheet of music and you understand Cypher, it's not much that breaks the game. You know, you can adjust accordingly. And one more ability on top of what characters get at the start of the game isn't going to break anything or kill anything. And then the idea that, you know, you can get a flavor ability and it doesn't remove one of your type abilities is also kind of cool, because again, that's just that little further step of being cool.
That first part, our house rules a lot anyway.
Yeah, so I will say that frankly, I like when I first started playing Cypher, I'm not, as everybody knows here, I'm not a big reader. I don't fully read things. I kind of just go with the flow. So I honestly thought that was how the rule was. I didn't know, like literally didn't know that you're supposed to permanently remove one of your type abilities to put in that flavor. I thought you just add the flavor on top, because that just makes sense to me. So yeah, this is definitely one I've used and enjoy. But yeah, it's definitely a good one, and I really do enjoy the latter part of that, where people can just, on top of their normal character creation, just pick one flavor on top of that. That's really good too, because like Dean said, doesn't break anything. It won't ruin any balance or anything. Cypher is very easy to, again, like I do, go with the flow. So if players can benefit from having one extra flavor ability to kind of round out how their character feels, to make it feel more like the character they actually want to play, why not?
I first off, for our 3-question criteria, I don't think it violates any of these. I do think it adds something to the overall experience that isn't normally present in the game. But I'm gonna say yes with a caveat, and it depends on the setting, because I think some flavor abilities can be can be overpowering, or can be considered an additional ability. So it depends on the setting. Like, I don't think I would necessarily go across the board on every MCG setting to give a free flavor, because I do think it could create some balancing issues. Like,
well, Anthony, I think that kind of goes what I was saying. I think everything is kind of situational. I mean, at least for me.
You don't know where my mind works, Dean. I say what goes without saying, because that's it's the whole.
No, and I get it. No, I get it. But I'm saying because I agree with you 100% that this wouldn't be necessarily a rule. If I was running a gritty modern game, I probably wouldn't add this rule in.
Yeah, that's the perfect example. But that's why we having a discussion about house rules,
right?
To talk about the applications and to bring up, right, how could it be effective? Like I'm not gonna assume anything. I'm just gonna state out.
Well, no, and that's what I'm saying. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm just saying that I agree with you. That it makes perfect sense that we wouldn't. I mean, any rule on here is the way I see it is I would only. It's situational.
Yeah, the only thing I was gonna say, anytime you deal with giving away an additional ability beyond, and there's a couple other house rules on this list that's gonna fall under this category, but I always view anytime there's additional ability stacking on to what a normal character possesses at its tier should be genre dependent on whether you do it or don't.
And also really depends on the comfort of the table as well. So some people may not want all these extra options. They might feel personally that it unbalances the game, even though that's not really the case for you as the GM. Some players do feel like giving all these extra choices might make other players max min or whatever, min max, become this kind of try to get the perfect build because you gave them an extra ability. And there's nothing wrong with thinking in that manner. It's definitely some players would try to take advantage of it, not just for, we're talking of it more flavoring a character, but there's definitely people out there who would game the system.
Or you could rule it like this and say, hey, you could only use flavor. Everyone gets a free flavor that is non-combat related. You could do that as well.
Or yeah,
So, like,
or whatever the caveat you want to add to it. Makes perfect sense.
So yeah, personally, once again, I think this is going to be a common theme, but I wouldn't be upset if someone brought this on the table for me. Like, I wouldn't veto this. I think it can be fun. I think it probably is a lot of fun. Me personally, I don't think I've done either one of these two, but yeah, it's not game breaking in any way. I think it's a good house rule.
I'll be honest with you. This is definitely a house rule. Because I've never seen it before either. Never thought about it before like that before either. But this is definitely a house rule I would add to like a supers game or a fantasy game. Those are like most definite because characters are, broader and, with larger scopes of abilities and so on and so forth. But then, like I said, the other side of the coin, if I'm running my gritty game, or if I want to bring a game that has a lot more tension to it, like a horror game, I may not allow this, because, I want that tension, I want that grit. So,
yep. So, Al, I think it's your turn to go. Number 8 on the list.
All right, so number 8 on the list we have submitted by Koan Mandala on Twitter. I know they're a writer for something. I'm blanking on what it is right now, though.
They got a blog out there, and they're also on our Discord a lot.
I'm quite a knowledgeable and great guy or person. I'm not sure, Either way, number 8 here. Players don't roll when they use ciphers. They only compare the cipher level to creature level for speed of play. This is one I have not heard of. Most people really like to roll dice. So I never really see things that remove raw dice rolling, because by raw you roll for most of these things. So yeah, I mean, for speed of play specifically, that at the end there is a huge, like, I guess, caveat to this house rule, like, right? So if you're trying to do like a streamed game, or like you're very, very pressed for time, you want to have as minimal dice rolling as possible, I can see wanting to use something like this just to kind of speed things up. But me personally, I love dice rolling. I'm not going to remove it from the raw. You know what I mean? But it's definitely interesting and a very easy way to go about a quick way to, make cipher effects go through.
I'm not sure I like this one. I don't think it's game breaking. Or in any way. And I understand why the rules in place to speed up play, but how often does that come up in a session? So how much time are you actually saving in a session? Because not all ciphers are targeted rolls. Some just are, effects that happen. So what are you saving? Maybe 2 minutes over the course of a 3-hour session. So I'm not sure if it's really that needed. And I think it kind of violates rule number 3, because I think rolling dice for players is fun. And anytime you eliminate a little bit of the fun, it's kind of, I don't know, would I veto this rule? No, it's not gonna come up often enough to make me angry or anything, but would I implement it in my game? Probably not.
And this is weird, Anthony, because we're agreeing again. We're not fighting tonight. This is wild, because I'm really of the same thought process. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it adds nothing. It just doesn't add anything for me. It doesn't really subtract anything either. Like you said, it's not game breaking. But as far as I see it, I don't see it adding anything to the overall experience. I guess in a sense, like Al said, like you said, I think it might be taken away, because you know what, we all agree, rolling dice is a lot of fun, and the possibility of, GM intrusions on that too. I don't know if I want to give that up either, because I like ones, and
Storm mentioned that in chat, that it eliminates the opportunity for fumbles and nat 20s and ones.
Right. And so my thing is, the thing I like about the idea, especially in Cypher System, I've gotten to the point that people rolling a 1 in my game is not I will say 90% of the time now does not mean it's detrimental. It truly will become some sort of interesting complication that adds to the narrative. Cypher System has made me a better GM in that sense because I don't look at ones as your traditional fumble anymore. It's a complication. So, and I hate missing those opportunities because I've come to love intrusions.
I mean, at the end of the day, I understand why it's there. It's useful if you want a super fast game speed. I just don't think it speeds up the game fast enough to warrant the fun elimination for rolling dice. So would I veto it if somebody said, hey, this is my house rule? No, but it's not something I would definitely implement. So are we done with number 8 on this list?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right, so number 7 was submitted by some handsome devil named Figs18 on Discord. Man, that guy is handsome. But his house rule that he added was separating race from descriptors if a setting or genre has multiple races in its world, and allowing players to pick 2 descriptors in a game if it makes sense for the setting.
We've all used this rule.
Yes. It's definitely a good one. It's definitely, especially, with the big staple when it comes to TTRPGs, the fantasy setting, people always look to have a race type of thing. And it, again, in a fantasy setting, like Dean had mentioned earlier, characters are usually more broad, more proficient. So having two descriptors just gives you more, skills, more ability points in some cases. It just definitely makes your character more proficient. And it just makes sense for certain settings, just without a doubt.
I mean, not even from me personally, not even, first of all, I think I'm on record as saying I hate. Hate's a strong word. I extremely dislike race as a descriptor. I'm not a fan at all. Like I think it's like pigeonholing your race as who you are as a person, which I'm not a fan of that. So, but I think it's more effective in the narrative. Oh, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I can't stand that. It's more effective in the narrative. That way everyone that plays an elf could play an elf slightly different. Everyone that, so it works great in settings like supers, sci-fi, and fantasy come to mind. But I know I put this house rule in the list, but I will say this. This is a house rule that's not for every game, and isn't a house rule that's not for every game group, because you will have some game groups that either one try to min-max it, or 2 think it's overpowering the setting. Because I will say this: when you had a whole new group of abilities to a character, if you're a new GM, you might not be able to balance like pre-written adventures or the creatures that are in the book without some experience. So I put this one in there because I like it and I've used it several times. I just don't use it in every game, and it can be game breaking. I will say that.
Again, I agree that it can be game breaking in the sense for people who are not prepared for it. I'll agree with that. But I'll also say that, not necessarily liking it as a descriptor. I can agree with that, but I would probably go with, Megan, our good friend Megan Tarantino's. I like race as a flavor. I like race, and I like because it's because she has such a broad use of it that you can get different abilities that are quote unquote indigenous to your race, or where you can become a representation of the classic things about your race through flavoring. But I do like the idea of actually 2 descriptors in the sense of
Dean,
2 descriptive words.
Something because you made me think of something.
Okay, well, but I'll be very brief. And Governor Breck, you mentioned fantasy races as flavoring. Look up Megan Tarantino's what is it? It's a supplement on Drive Through RPG.
Fantasy Ancestors.
Fantasy Ancestries. It's a great product. It really addresses just that, using race as a flavor, and it goes all the way up to tier 6. It's a really smart product.
I just want to break down how we did it, so people, because I just realized the way I worded it, it's a little wonky. But in a fantasy setting, right? If you have Gods of the Fall, God Forsaken, Cypher System, you have basically Gonza Gaming's
Mortal Fantasy.
You essentially have every race in the core D&D setting, right? So what you do is you allow them to take the descriptor, that's the race, and then add a descriptor on top of that race, right? If someone is playing a human, they get to pick any 2 descriptors they want and combine them, opposed to having, an elven, elven archer or whatever the other descriptor is. Humans are allowed to pick 2 descriptors, and that's to make up for the difference. But when me and Dean crafted, me and Dean were on a old school first edition D&D kick about a year and a half ago. We actually sat down and crafted all the core 1E races from D&D. So, and we have them written somewhere offline, and we ran a couple of the old D&D modules. If anybody wants that, watching this video, just hit us up on Discord. We'll gladly share it out with you guys. Yep. But yeah, we crafted the first edition D&D feel for all the races, if anybody's interested in that as well. It works great for Star Wars. It works, Star Wars has a ton of races. It works great for anything sci-fi fantasy, really. It works good in Numenera, because Numenera itself has a ton of really cool races that they have descriptors for. You could use that as well. Yeah, I personally like this rule, but I do know that this rule has some hate, because when I've mentioned it a couple of times on Discord, you get the detractors, but that's why you do house rules. House rules is not for every house; it's for your house.
And let's be honest. Once again, when you think about Cypher System, the modularity of it, plug and play. You put in what you want, you take out what you don't want, and I think that makes Cypher, the creme de la creme in that department, because house rules don't have to necessarily be breaking, and it doesn't change the atmosphere or flavor or flow of Cypher System in of itself. So.
And I think, Dean, I'm surprised you didn't mention this, but this also works well for mega heroes in a superhero campaign.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll give you a perfect example. Characters like the Hulk, that are scientists and super broody guys, it's hard to get both those elements when you're creating a character that has high social mental skills plus superpower, in the way that the system is designed. So if you give them a second descriptor, it's a lot easier to build a super smart Hulk.
Well, if you think about it, and especially with the new descriptors that they added in Claim the Sky, because some of those really would have, you think about it, you could say Bruce Banner is a learned, amazing warrior who rages. So those.
The only house rule I would add to that, Dean, you're absolutely right. But I wouldn't allow you to take 2 Claim the Sky descriptors, because the Claim the Sky.
learned. No,
I know.
Okay, I got you.
I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
The descriptors are slightly more powerful than the core book.
I would definitely agree with that. That's like, yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect perfect idiom to throw in there. Yes, you don't use 2 of those because.
And let's see who makes Superman.
Al, you want to add something else to it?
No, we think we hit the nail on the head with this one. It's one we've talked about a lot off camera. One that gets mentioned a bunch on the server. So, it's definitely a great house rule. But again, take it with a grain of salt, especially if you're a newer GM.
Right.
Definitely.
So the next house rule we got was the GM can allow players one chance to change one of their character's descriptor or Focus prior to reaching tier 2. This was submitted by Steve Fridsma on Facebook. I find this one kind of interesting, and I don't think it's game breaking in any way. I think it gives you the, it does give you that flexibility, kind of the if you watch certain movies or certain TV shows and you see a character evolve, and if it's the evolution between tier 1 and tier 2, I mean, or in books and stuff like that. I mean, like, you get to one character, you might think they're, a frightened, scaredy cat, and they're going to always be running, but, they turn out to be the reluctant hero. So I can literally see that being a pretty cool rule to implement in a game. Never thought about using this one, but definitely I like it. I find it fun. I don't think it's game breaking in any way. And yeah, it's cool.
So you guys, we've already, or if you've listened to our stories before, you've probably heard us mention my home game where a paladin fell from grace and I had to switch his works miracles foci to be something else, to be the opposite. So I would even take this. I love, again, I should have prefaced this by saying I love this house rule. It's awesome for both reasons. Our Stocktoe said in the chat there that it can be evolution or it can be retconning a descriptor that doesn't necessarily work for your character or focus, whatever have you, right? But I would even take this one step further and allow it kind of like a story arc type thing. Like if someone's story arc completes and something about their essence of their character changed over the course of that story arc, it just makes sense to change your descriptor. Like that's an awesome house rule for something like that. And it's something I never thought about before. That's chef's kiss for like campaigns with story arcs and whatnot. That's excellent. That is excellent.
Me personally, I think everyone that games consistently or games a lot have experienced this. You created a character and on paper, it looks awesome. You're all excited. Like, yo, this is the character I want to play. This is going to be badass. I'm going to kick some serious butt. And then you put the character on the table and it freaking stinks. You don't like the way the abilities work. You don't like the way the social skills work. It's just, it's not interesting to you to play. And this gives you a back door to get out of, your character design mistakes. So I'm all for this. I agree with both of you. It isn't game breaking. It's no fun when you committed to a 3 or 4 session game and you don't like the character you're playing. So this definitely adds fun to the list. So I am 100% agree with this house rule. I think I think I've done this house rule without even thinking about it, but I think every table should have this rule. I'm not saying change your character, your focus mid-game, but being able, after the session, being able to say, hey, you know what, I'm not enjoying this character. Do you mind if I change my focus? We'll come up with a way to make it fit in the narrative. So yeah, I like this rule a lot.
It's a good one. And again, it's one we've all kind of used in a fashion or some way, but just having it on the table, like you mentioned, for those people who kind of don't want to or don't really super enjoy the character, they have that out to change it up. And yeah, that's awesome. And honestly, if I ever do a campaign, that is going to be a house rule I use as far as like character evolution, because the charming paladin might become jaded over the course of the adventure, and he's not charming anymore. Now he's jaded. Like, it just makes too much sense. It's so good. It's elegant. It's great.
Yeah, somebody in chat mentioned it scrolled so fast, but it has applications in game and out game. It can satisfy the narrative so that because something happened in the narrative that the character is forced to change their focus, and outside of the game, if the freaking character is not fun, you know what I mean? You should be entitled to change your focus, at least in the first, 1 or 2 sessions. So
like you said, I think I like the whole idea of it being the whole tier. because you don't know. I mean, depending on how much XP and so on and so forth, how quick your characters are moving across that first tier, there's a lot that happens. There's a lot of things that can happen and influence that ideal of the character. Like you said, Al, your paladin, became an anti-paladin because he was just, he said he wanted to be a paladin, but he acted not accordingly, and I think that was brilliant of you by, basically doing an inverse of his focus. So not just being able to change it, but if something has to be evolved or reskinned or manipulated, what have you, you've got that ability, and it's kind of baked right in to the whole idea of that rule. So I'm with it.
Who's reading the next one, Al?
That's Al.
Yep, that was me. Sorry, I got a little caught up in the chat there. But yeah, we're on to number 5 here. And unfortunately, the person who submitted it has already left the chat. It was our good buddy, Ken Davidson. He submitted this on Facebook. But his house rule is the GM can give a floating ambiguous asset that can be used later used later on your next roll. For example, there's an NPC that sings a song about the Jade Colossus. If you succeed on a challenge, you glean a fact/asset that you'll be able to use later on. And that's an awesome house rule. I think that's kind of one we almost all use without thinking about it, because I know me personally, that's something I actually offer a lot of the times for a natural 20 or even a 19. Yep. And now that I think about it, yeah, this is just kind of like a house rule that we have. It's kind of like a floating cipher-ish because it's an asset, and it's something you can use later down the line. It's just we usually tie it to 19s and 20s. But yeah, that's an excellent, I love this house rule. And again, I think we kind of use it already.
Yeah, we do. And I actually would take it a step further and say you can even use it in reverse on ones as well, on GM intrusions, because there have been times that I put the GM intrusion in my pocket, and have the effects of, it still is directly related to what they were doing, but it happens a little bit later on, or the information that comes about or whatever, the complication is the same, the same kind of ideology. I love the rule. I think it's great. I don't think it breaks anything.
I'm not sure if we're interpreting the rule the same way, because I see this rule as the person's role play is going to dictate assets towards later roles involving that specific thing that they role played very well. Maybe I'm just misreading it, but it seems to me, if someone, like the way this is, like if someone is role playing and being outside the box in the narrative, that's making the whole table and making the GM enjoy it, they get, like, for the example, is he sings a song about the Jade Colossus. Next role involving the Jade Colossus is where the person would get the asset to. Mm-hmm. So it's dictated, it rewards good role play, and it rewards people that players, it would encourage players to be involved in the moment in the story, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, I agree with you there, man. I see that. But I'm just saying.
I don't think that has anything to do with intrusions or anything like that.
Oh no. I'm just saying.
So purely narrative.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at it from a purely narrative standpoint, and I agree with you there. But I'm saying,
I know Ken is a very narrative GM.
Well, no, I get that, but I said, if you remember, I said I would expand upon it or take it this much further with that whole concept because I like it, and I was just saying that, and like what Al said, adding 19 or 20, or and I went reverse and said I would add my GM intrusions to it too. I would still tie it all to the same idea, if you will. Yeah.
So I guess
I get it.
brought up a good point. This is the Cypher version of inspiration.
Yeah, kind of. But what I was saying before was not that we were using it like he was describing, but we use it in a sort of a fashion with the 19s and 20s. And then this is a narrative one. This is not no roles involved, and I love it. This is amazing.
It's great. Like the way we would use it was more like a reward for good gameplay. Right. This is more a reward for good character role play. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's a good one.
Like it's a slight difference, but I think this is a phenomenal one, and I would absolutely use it. Like in a lot of games that we run, if someone is really leading into their character on a specific area, that's when you be like, okay, you know what? You got the floating asset, anything involving sewers, because you just spent 3 minutes monologuing on how your new shoes smell like rotten sewage and how like,
Well, no,
it's like a good way to reward, narrative character development.
that one game that I read, Tenebris Infinitum, that we ran for Isolocon, Al's character would have gotten that kind of reward because he leaned so hard into both of you and him, you leaned so hard in your character with his rosary beads and being religious, that was what he held on to. And Al leaned really, really hard into the fact that his character was like, look, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do nothing. That is not what I'm just an engineer. And he leaned into it, and you guys really role played it. So yeah, I can see rewarding those two areas. Had we been using this rule, it could have been rewarded later on.
Sorry,
It's also okay.
No, I was just laughing my ass off because I don't remember my character in that game at all. I just love bringing it up when I don't remember things. That's all.
I think it's also worth mentioning that this also adds a added layer of bookkeeping. And I know some people the reason they play Cyphers to avoid bookkeeping. So this will be, especially if you give a lot of floating assets and they specific to certain things, it's like, oh, I got a floating asset to anything involving Jade Colossus. I got to write this on my sheet. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we got to ask Ken, does this floating asset have an expiration date? That's another good question to ask Ken. Like, is it only good for the session or is it for the campaign? Right. You know what I mean? Because that also affects the way bookkeeping will work.
That's actually a good one. I mean, personally, I would probably, I only run one shots though. So, but if I was in a campaign and they had a floating asset, I think it really depends on where the session ends, right? So if the session for whatever reason had to end in the middle of like people had to go, whatever, we just reached our time limit, then yeah, it would hold over because it just makes sense. But let's say at the end of the session, they're doing a long rest. They've reached the end of their journey. For whatever reason, they didn't use the floating asset. It's just gone because they rested. That just kind of makes sense to me anyway.
Yo, Ken, I'm gonna steal this. I'm
gonna definitely use it, but for me, it would be more situational. I kind of with you, Al, but it would really be situational. So, for example,
I would steal this on so many levels. In fact, if say you roll 2 natural 20s against goblins, your next attack against a goblin, you immediately have an asset.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like you can use.
No, that's what I'm saying. I agree. Yeah. I agree with it, but that's what I'm saying. Where I would make, even in that sense that I was talking about it going away or not going away. So, prime example would be like, let's just say like he did a song about the Jade Colossus. Well, it's only applicable with something to do with the Jade Colossus. If they've moved on to, I don't know, the Blight or, the Steadfast or whatever, then that asset is basically useless.
Yeah, but you still have to keep track of it because say you go back to the Jade Colossus.
Oh, no, I would, no, and that's what I'm saying. I would keep track of it in that sense, but I'm saying that's how I see it. I see it that way,
Yeah, I'm definitely stealing this one.
It's definitely a good one.
I read it on Facebook.
We'll definitely all be using that one.
Ken, consider that stolen. It's in my book. All right, it's my go?
Yeah, yep. Number 4.
This one was submitted by Christopher Robin Neglien, Gonza Gaming, and he submitted it on Facebook. And now, guys, we get into the controversial house rules. These are the ones that fall under the category of either you love it or you hate it, but you definitely have an opinion on it. So, and I think the next 4 all fall under this list. So number 4, Gonza wrote, splitting XP you get from GM intrusions and session ending milestones. GM intrusion XPs can be used for player intrusions, rerolls, short and long-term benefits. Session ending XP can be used for character advancement only.
So I like it, but in a way, So you guys know that, or at least I've spoken about it with y'all privately, probably. When it comes to leveling up in Cypher System, or I guess in any TTRPG at this point, I think I do it the same way across any game. I'm of the preference of doing milestone advancements or leveling. So once they hit that certain milestone, boom, everybody has an advancement, whether that be what you call it. I'm getting off track here. The reason I like this one is because it lets players use XP in the game, which is what's fun about XP, doing that short term rerolls, whatever have you. But I think it's kind of silly to split it because you can just do milestone. Why keep track of a separate pool of XP when you could just be like, you guys advanced? Like it feels kind of. I mean, again, you might want to, I guess it depends on you as the GM and your table. You might want to reward more players than other players when it comes to the advancement XP that's the end of the session to reward behaviors you want to see more. But then, again, that might cause balancing issues. People might feel like they're not leveling up as fast as the other ones. I only see that causing problems. I've never done it. I've never done it personally. I'm just saying from reading at my first impressions. I would definitely just stick with milestone advancement instead of having two pools of XP.
For the record, milestone advancement was mentioned several times in our, suggestions for the fans. But I wanted to grab house rules that were kind of touching different aspects of the game. So I didn't include that one in there, but that was asked. There were several people that house rule milestones, by the way.
And I'll look at it from this lens. Initially, probably really up until like 6 to 9 months ago, I would have absolutely said no to this particular house rule. I didn't like it. I didn't care. My biggest thing was, you know what, people get on board. It's how the game is played. You either use it for this or you use it for that. It's your choice, however you want to do it. And exactly what Al talked about, you had the people hoarding XP, would never re-roll, took all the GM intrusions, all rolled once, so on and so forth, never spent XP within game, and then just advanced very quickly. Overall, not necessarily game breaking for me because, a tier 1 character can still play with a tier 6 character. The only problem is, that character that's, a couple of tiers ahead got way more tools and assets to play with than the lower level person, than the lower tier person. So I started doing, the milestones like Al was talking about. And like in my supers game, since it's an open table, but I've been having the same people come back, I'm using, 2 sets of XP, the in-game XP and then the after session XP, so they can advance. And that's what
you basically using what Chris says.
Yeah, I'm literally I'm using it because it works.
Yeah, and now that you're speaking, it actually made me think that this would probably be how I would handle Westmarch XP. Because you're not going to be there for every milestone for those players. So they're going to need something from you to indicate they did stuff. So in the case of a West Marches specifically, then I think I'd be okay with 2 separate pools.
I think I'm a full on. Finally, let me take off my jacket because here's where the disagreement comes. I'm still at where Dean was 6 months ago. I am. Let me preface this first by saying that I wouldn't veto a game if someone gave me these rules, right? But I'm a big fan, and I really like to champion player agency, and I'm always leery of any house rule that takes away the decision-making and the agency from the player. What your guy's saying, I absolutely agree with. I think it makes sense, but I don't think it's the GM's place to make those decisions for the player. If a player gets his enjoyment from hoarding XP to advance his character, that's a player's right to do so. If a player wants to use blow-ons XP for narrative purposes in the story, and that's where that person gets their enjoyment from, it's their right to do so. I'm not saying that I wouldn't play this if this was in it. Like, I'm not anti-against it, but that's the reason why I don't put it in my game. I like the players to have the agency to make their decisions themselves. I don't like any rules that forces the GM to pigeonhole the choices the players have when the original rule set gave them those choices in the first place. I don't feel it's my place to take away choices from players.
I can understand what you're saying. And see, the way I look at it is, in that respect, I don't feel like I'm taking choices away from players. I look at it in the sense that I'm basically managing my game. I'm basically managing the flow, because if I don't want the game to end in 6 sessions or something like that, or I don't want one player, to be the one that offsets the game, because now I have to pull out, major league monstrosities and obstacles because they're tier 4 and everybody else is tier 1. I don't want to do that. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I get what you're saying, and like I said, I was in that boat with you.
And just my rebuttal to that, and not saying that, but I think there's ways that a GM could mitigate the problems that you're saying within the confines of the rules without taking away an agency from the player. Like as a GM, there's stuff you could do in game, like you could start lowering the amount of XP given out per session in order for the other players to catch up.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, even still though, even if you still,
there's still adjustments you can make without changing the core rule.
Well, again, I mean, I look at it this way, Anthony. You could make those same adjustments that you're talking about. But if I've got one player, okay, if I'm giving out, let's just say arbitrarily, I'm giving out 1 XP, per ending of the session, and I'm giving out maybe, another, an intrusion per player. So that's approximately 3 to 4 XP that you can earn every session. Now, this person here is earning the 3 XP every session, but everybody else is using their XP.
Yeah, but Dean, you act like conversations can't be had.
Oh no, I'm not saying that.
But you know that it's like I don't want to get into like this big like philosophical argument on people's right to make decisions, right?
Oh yeah, I got you.
It's like the big brother argument, you're not doing the right thing, so I'm gonna do it for you. I'm not. That's not my mentality. I don't think that you could have a conversation like, hey, look, I know you wanna get to the next level, right? There has to be a middle ground, yeah.
Oh no, and I agree with you. I'm not, like I said, I'm not arguing the point.
I don't think problem players is a good enough excuse. That's just me personally. But like I said, this isn't something that I wouldn't play in the game. If you told me, hey, this is how I'm doing it, it's not like gonna kill my enjoyment.
Right.
Claire, or the Infinite Construct in the chat, for those who don't know, excellent person. Hi Claire. They put a great middle ground where they'll set caps on how high a player might tier up before proceeding past a certain point of a story, I guess. So like what Claire says here, she says, I'll put a cap on certain portions of a campaign, i.e. you can only advance to tier 2 with 1 advancement. So they'll still have their choice with XP, but with certain constraints, where that conversation like Anthony's talking about is happening.
Right.
It's excellent.
I mean, there's definitely ways around it. And like I said, not disagreeing with you at all, Ant, because like I said, I was in that camp.
But that's the whole reason why we having these discussions, is because I think this one in particular, this is one of those that there's 2 sides of the fence and people, stay on their side. So like, you know how I feel about agency, and maybe it's because I improv a lot, and with improv, the players have all the agency because they're basically dictating the story. And I like that feel. I don't want to have to, I don't want to babysit anyone's decisions on stuff that's on their sheet. Maybe it's me being lazy, but that's my take on that.
Before we proceed, I guess I will say this: The reason I use milestone advance is kind of variation on this kind of rule, is that it allows the players to not worry. Like, I know for you it's removing a choice. For me, it's removing.
No. Milestone is different, Al. Milestone, because I've used milestone before too. I don't know if we've done it the same way, but milestone is different. I go at the end of every session, you get 4 XP to get an advancement, right? Whatever XP happens in the game, you could save it for another advancement, or you could use it during the game. But you know, at the end of every session, you getting 4 XP for an advancement. So that's what I would do. That's how I did.
I never combined the two. I never said, hey, you can also use your XP for additional advancements. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm going to think about that one.
I'm all about agency, baby.
Yeah.
For the people. That was the man.
So I think it's on to Dean. Yeah, with the next one.
To the next question. I mean, Anthony told you about some handsome guy that put a question in, and all of this good stuff. But I tell you, I think the most interesting man in the world basically put this next question up. This guy named Alpha Dean, and he was on Discord. I don't know about it, but I find him pretty interesting. But at any rate, when you're making a roll where you're using costed abilities and applying levels of effort to the roll, you calculate the total cost of the action before subtracting the edge. That is not the rules of Raw, but for me, it speeds things up. It makes the world simpler. We've been doing that since we started playing the game. I mean, and we even found out that some people over at MCG do the same thing, but the rules say that you pick where your edge will be subtracted from, and once that is done, it is done in that respect.
You basically pick the subtraction first and then do the addition.
Exactly.
I can't put in chat. This is Edgegate all over again. We've beaten this to the ground. I personally, like Dean, this is my preferred method of doing it. I know it's not the raw. I'm tired of people telling me it's not the raw, but for me, it's just for speed of play. It's just easier, right? But I do agree that it breaks down at higher tiers. But for me personally, this is just the easier way for me to do it.
Agreed.
So this house rule it's so rare because most of the time from even like tier 1 to tier 3, all of your edge is being spent on either the effort or the cost of the thing. Like there's no spillover. So it doesn't really ever even come up. But the fact that raw makes you choose, right? So and again, we've talked about this so freaking much, but it's mind-boggling to me that at tier 6, someone might have to spend 1 point on an ability because they're choosing to use all their like 2 levels of effort or whatever, and their edge has to go towards effort, but now they have to pay for their ability, which is 1 point, like onslaught or some shit, right? It makes no sense for a tier 6 person to be spending points to cast onslaught. It's mind-boggling. So I think this is one of the situations where, again, I could be wrong because I don't have much experience with high-level play or talking to people who do it, but I feel like this is a case where the majority of people actually use the house rule instead of the actual raw. Again, I could be wrong about that.
It depends on what you play, because I've had some people that at cons tell me, no, that's not how it's done.
Yeah. I mean, that's the funniest thing. And literally, like I said, I've actually seen people at MCG do it the same way we do. So, and it's funny, but like Anthony said, you will have somebody at a con argue with you about what the rule book says.
Claire said Roll20 uses the house rule.
yeah, it does.
Which we've seen firsthand, it does.
No, but it does make a difference in 5th or 6th tier.
And that's the only time.
But me personally, the reason why I don't like the raw rule is it's adding an extra step of needless math, if you ask me. And 2, it's opening up the opportunity for newer players to make a mistake. So the GM be like, aha, you wasted 3 edge because you could have applied it to this. I don't know. It just.
That is a great point.
I mean, in that respect, that just, I'm at the point where it's like, I just wouldn't want that at all.
And again, like, not
Super
only
might make a difference.
yeah, like what Anthony is saying, like it gives newer players an opportunity to mess up because they chose the wrong portion of their action to apply their edge to. But and I mentioned this before, like thematically to me, it just doesn't make sense. Like for any sort of character, it's like so you're telling me at tier 1 you can cast your onslaught for free, but then at tier 6 your onslaught's going to cost you a little something because you used your effort. You didn't use as much effort as you should have. You know what I mean? Like it's weird. It's weird.
Also, another thing I think is worth mentioning that that we didn't bring up in this, where it does affect, is if you have say you got like 4 or 5 edge, right? You have 4 edge, and you want to use the edge on like what you said, the onslaught is free, right? If you use it on onslaught, you lose those other 3 edge points because you can't split the edge, and that's where the rule is, where we do it is wrong, because we subtract it. So if you have 4 edge, we essentially allowing them to split edge on multiple things. Like a perfect example is if you're using edge on onslaught and applying the level of effort and you have 4 edge, the way we do it, it's covering both those costs. The way the war is written, it can only cover 1.
Exactly.
So, so I see where oh no, you're giving the player an advantage. But me personally, like, who gives a fuck? If I want to get them, I'll get them anyway. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Exactly.
I mean, and see, and again, I mean, and that's kind of for me, the thought process is the only reason edge has a number, because I don't even look at edge. I don't look at edge in that sense. I just look at edge as what it's supposed to be. This is where what you're good at. This is your wheelhouse. So, I look at it I guess through the cinematic or the visual lens. For example, if you were to think of Jackie Chan in his prime. Jackie Chan in his prime had 6 edge in speed, plain and simple. And anytime he used, whether it was a ability that had an effort to it or ability that didn't have a lot of effort to it, he still was using the same edge. So I never looked at it really in a numerical.
That's how I view it too, Dean. Another thing is worth mentioning as well that our rule doesn't apply for, because once again, I agree with this, the way our house rule, but I just want to put it out there for everyone. It's also when you have edge in 2 different categories.
Correct.
That also makes, so if you have edge in intellect and you have edge in might, and you're doing actions that involve both intellect and might, right? How does that work? Because once again, you can't calculate both those edges if you know what I mean. So I'm not saying all house rule doesn't have flaws. That's what I'm trying to say.
And that's very true as well, Claire. Infinite Construct said in the chat, she said, yeah, getting players used to the idea that 3 edge equals 1 free level of effort is really insightful, and I think that's really the kind of the thrust of what I want people to look at. Edge is not, I think it's the one ambiguous idiom in Cypher that isn't explained clearly enough, if you will. Like we always talk about edge and effort having those E's, the same thing. I think the concept of edge isn't defined in a clear sense either. So, but that's just my 2 cents on that.
I think we've pushed this house rule over the edge.
You just had to make a bad pun. But either way, let's go on to number 2 here. And this is actually one I use. And if I had submitted something, it's probably one I probably would have submitted. But number 2 comes to us from Stephanie Deal. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct, on Facebook. And their house rule is use your recovery rolls in whatever order you wish. And I love it. That's one I use. I don't know if you guys do it too. I feel like you guys use it as well. It just kind of makes sense. Like, players are going to feel bad if they have to take a recovery roll after combat, right? And they still have all of them, right? They have to use their action one right after a combat, like leading up to the next encounter or whatever, and they can't save that for in the heat of things, they should have the option to hold on to that one action one for when things get spicy. And this just handles that pretty well.
Especially if the narrative is dictating the guys are resting for 2 hours or 4 hours in the inn, or you're like, there should be no reason why you can't take your hour recovery roll if you know your guys are all peeing at an inn, you know, or all peeing at a bar or whatever the case may be.
Exactly. I mean, I love this rule. I've used it. The whole concept is, the way I see it is, you get 4 recovery rolls throughout the day. You know what? You eat all your recovery rolls up. You eat them all up. You know, this is part of the resource management idea that I try to push with Cypher System, to get people to understand, to look at Cypher through a different lens. You know, because, you know, most people look at your ability scores as, you know, that's just a static number. I'm strong. I have an 18 strength. No, you don't have an 18 strength because you're strong. You have an 18 strength because you have stamina. You have something to use. And so I do try to definitely use this house rule, but also try to incorporate the understanding of what the pool representation is for each of those particular pools. So.
Just to throw it in there, because, you know, I'm just going to talk about the other aspect of it. This is also very setting, like horror games. You might not want to use this rule, depending on the horror setting. Also, we're not talking about the time frame of the recovery rolls. It's using them in any order you wish, but you're still doing the action 10 minutes, you know, 1 hour. You're still following those guidelines. We're not saying that you have 4 recovery rolls and you could use them like 4 actions. I just want to throw that out there.
Right, exactly.
Because I do not agree with that, because that removes the resource management idea entirely. And I do think the reason why the rule is set in order is because it's more in line with the resource management style game. Because if you have it in order, that's resource management. That's,
absolutely.
Hey, I'm not gonna use my points because, like, I'm not gonna apply effort this because I only have an hour recovery roll and I don't know when's the next chance I'm gonna get an opportunity to take a roll. I think in campaigns, I might run it the as written way to test it out, but for one shots, it makes no sense, because in a one shot, there's almost no opportunity that you're gonna get an hour gap in your one shot. So you essentially only giving characters, you know, the option of 2 recovery rolls in a 4-hour session. So this gets hand waved. Even Sean added this whole house rule in all one shot because it just doesn't make sense. If you have 2 or 3 combats in a one shot, they might need more than 2 recovery rolls.
In Claim the Sky, you only need 1 combat that you're gonna need more than 1 recovery roll.
Yeah, we took 2 recovery rolls in 1 combat. You're right.
Exactly. Listen, and yes, and you know what? And I should have said that, Anthony. You do make a very, very valid point. In campaigns, I do more or less kind of try to run it, you know, in order. But for one shots or 1 or 2 shots, I'm like, whatever, you know. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, but this rule came up. This was probably the most. This one was the most. I think the most suggested house rule out of all the house rules we had. I think I might have gotten this one like 15 to 20 suggestions of this one. But the reason why it's not number 1, because number 1 is a more controversial rule.
It's the one we fight about.
Yeah, and a lot of people either submitted one, because I don't know if you guys remember how I phrased it, was tell me the rule you'd like to use and tell me the rule that you hate the most. And this one had like equal number on hate and like. So I was like, I gotta put this number 1.
I think we can just dive right into it, honestly.
Yeah. So this one is okay. You can.
No, I'll let you know. You can go ahead. You were just talking about like this.
So I didn't even put a name. I just put submitted by several people on social media, and this one was re-rolling a natural one still introduces a GM intrusion, even if the roll is successful. So what I mean by this is if you roll a 1 and you pay 1 XP to re-roll that roll, the GM still gets the intrusion.
And guess what? That's my rule. I've been using it. I've been implementing it from day one. Anybody who's ever played my game knows that happens. If you don't like it, I think that's the only spot I'm a dictator in. I think if you roll a 1, the GM should get his intrusion, even if you succeed. That's just me.
I'm like 80% on Dean's side on this. I think the majority of the time I like this rule. I think that I think a 20 and a 1 has to have meaning. Like even if you, and there's no, a GM intrusion don't mean negative. Just because it just means a change in the narrative, right?
Exactly.
So if someone rolls a 1, that doesn't mean that Dean is going to decapitate your character because you re-rolled you paid 1 XP to re-roll and then you were successful. All Dean is doing is changing the narrative. He might actually benefit you with the GM intrusion. So yeah, I never viewed like GM intrusions as negative. So I never saw the big hate for, like, this rule has a lot of, some people hate with a passion. They hate this house rule. And I'm on the fence either way. I think a lot of times I prefer to use this rule, but I've done it not using it either.
And I've done it both ways. And honestly, for a while there, actually, it was before I guess we started talking about this video. I thought we had a discussion prior, like maybe a year or two ago, whatever, however long ago, that it was the raw that when you re-roll the 1, you keep the GM intrusion. Like, honestly, I thought that was the raw for a long time.
You know why? Because Dean's a convincing mofo. Dean has a way of saying a rule that you just believe him. He should be like a politician. He's like, yeah, that's how it goes. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. But we can start running with it.
Now that we're discussing it, right? I think because me personally, I don't think I care. Like, if I'm the player, I don't care one way or the other. If it's gonna be one way or the other way, it doesn't matter to me, right? And I think now going forward as a GM, I'm going to put it up to a vote to the players since it's so divisive, right? Because me, even as a GM, I know Claire in the chat there, which is very funny. GMs don't roll in Cypher, so 1s are our crits. Don't deny us that fun, which is a very valid point, right? You don't want an XP to take away your crit, right? But me personally, if a player wants to avoid the GM intrusion by re-rolling it, they can do it. I feel like, because again, in most of the games that I play, if a player wants the intrusion, they'll just not re-roll. They'll just say, hey, I rolled a 1. Do what you're going to do, right?
But I think most of the hate comes from Al is the distrust of a GM handling an intrusion. Most people automatically assume that intrusions are super negative. Like,
And
times I've done like games on the server with strangers, not like our core group that we play with all the time, and I'll be like, you want an intrusion? And they're like, I see their eyes light up like, oh, what's gonna happen? I don't know, right? And then I'll hit them with your friend provided you an asset, it came and showed up, or aid came up, and then they're like, oh, I was like, all intrusions don't have to be bad. It could be positive. It could be funny. It could be an obstacle that doesn't necessarily affect you, but the entire party. It could be all sorts of things.
I mean, listen. I mean, the one time I was running a Indiana Jones style adventure, and I was having a blast with it. And just like you were saying, it didn't affect the player. The player was figuring out the puzzle. He rolled a 1, figuring out the puzzle. I said, you want, GM intrusions coming, blah blah blah. Well, what he did affected the doorway from behind where everybody else was standing. So the floor started, doing the breakup and all of that. So they had to deal with that obstacle while he still had to figure out the puzzle. So it wasn't necessarily, it was just a complication in the story.
Oh, I have a perfect example. Remember when we played the Warriors game? When we played the Warriors? And I forgot who it was. I'm trying to remember who it was, but somebody was trying to break into the police car. Right?
Oh, that was me and the other guy. We were trying to get the cop car.
Yeah, you rolled a 1 on the break. We rolled, and you know what the intrusion was? The intrusion was that they hot rodded the car, but Disco Inferno was playing on the radio and they broke it. So it played, it was just on a loop in the car the entire ride. And so they couldn't hear each other talking much because the volume was on maximum level. And it was that burn, baby, burn, Disco Inferno, burn. So like anytime they were trying to talk to each other, it was at a hindrance. You know, like trying to relate messages. That wasn't a horrible, you know, GM intrusion. They still accomplished the task. They still broke into the cop car. You know what I mean? But it was a change in the story.
Yeah, like I said, the same thing with my favorite intrusion, where the guys ended up with the, you know, the NPC nemesis. I had no plans for that guy, but you know, he caught the sword and was like, "Hey, you're not as good as you think you are." Same thing, you know, just added to the narrative. It wasn't terrible, you know. It wasn't you lopped somebody's head off, you lost your sword, you broke your weapon, you killed your partner. So I agree. Rolling 1 still introduces the intrusion. You're getting it.
Yeah, but I've also played it the other way. Either one, is it fun? It might be fun for the GM. It might not be fun for the players. So I don't know the answer to this one, but yeah, me personally, I like the rule. I like the house rule. I know Al wanted to go the other way, right?
I will say that this, if you guys have more to say, you could definitely chime in. But what I would say is I would put it up to a vote, right? That would be like, if I'm not sure myself personally how I want to run it, how I'm feeling it for that session, in a session 0 type discussion, I would just say, hey, how do you want to do this? I know this is a popular house rule. How do you guys want to handle it? Just literally put it to a vote. But I will say this, though. There are some settings that would lend themselves better to having the intrusion still happen regardless. For instance, Darkest Dungeon, like that just makes sense to have the intrusion happen no matter what. It can come on a setting by setting basis depending on how you think it might add to the narrative of what's going on or the feel of the setting. But again, I think I personally would put it up to a vote now if I'm not sure myself. Because I personally, it doesn't affect me. I don't think it takes too much fun away from me as a GM if a player rerolls a 1 and the GM intrusion goes away. And again, it is fun to constantly do GM intrusions even if they reroll, but it's not going to make or break my game either way. So
Jason C added a wrinkle to the house rule. So he was saying, so they could spend 1 XP to reroll or spend 2 XP to reroll and refuse the intrusion. That might be a happy medium for both rules. I would never spend 2 XP to refuse an intrusion, though.
Never.
I mean, the reality is, I think most people who want to refuse an intrusion 90% of the time are still coming from the old mindset. Player versus GM, GM versus player, however you want to look at it, and believing that every time a 1 hits the table, it's a negative. So I would probably say no, because I'm going to try and attempt to, you know, bridge that divide and let people know it's not about being a ruthless. Now, trust me, sometimes negative things will happen. You know, and with it being Cypher System, yeah, I can introduce a negativity at any time. But like Anthony said, the consequences, that they're not just consequences, but there should be, you know, something special about that 1 or that 20. You know, you got 17, 17, 18, 19, and 20 all offer something special
to the player. Yeah.
I think the 1 should also be that offer. And the thing about it is, it can be special for the player.
Can somebody think about the GM plans?
Especially in this game where we don't roll dice.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. I'm like Claire said, don't take my joy.
I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up there.
I'm just curious from chat if you guys put where you stand on this one. I think this is, I'm just curious to see where the chat stands. We have a good 20 people on there. Let's see if they either like this house rule or they dislike it.
How many yays and nays do we have for this house rule?
I mean, so far I see Jason and Claire both agreeing to the house rule. So it's 2-0 right now. Oh, a no. So 2-1.
Oh, he said at least they see how it flies.
So 3-1 now. We got Stormbringer saying intrusion should always happen. I mean, yeah, I can see from a player's perspective, like wanting the option to be able to re-roll the 1, right? Because a lot of the time
you always get to re-roll the 1. You just are always getting that intrusion.
And again, as a player, you don't want, like, again, it harks back to what you said about that player versus GM mentality. They need to kind of let go of that to kind of understand that an intrusion is not going to end existence, you know?
Right. Well, and I get that too, Claire.
Let's have some clarity, because I think there's a little confusion going on. You still get to re-roll and succeed.
Yeah.
Dean is not saying that you can't roll and succeed. What he's saying is if you roll again and succeed, you have a success with a GM intrusion attached to it. So It could be like success with a complication, or it could be a success with a boon added to your success. It's just a change in the narrative. So the intrusion is happening, whether it's a failure or a success. The re-roll is irrelevant. It's the refusing, where the confusion lies is that if you pay XP to re-roll, you immediately negate the intrusion.
Governor Breck, he says that he thinks a player should always have the option to refusing an intrusion. And that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can go back and forth about this all day, quite honestly.
But before we move on, just anybody in chat or someone watching this later on YouTube, if we missed any house rules that you think are pretty big ones, let us know in chat or let us know in the comment section on YouTube, because like I said, I didn't get all of them. I just got the ones that I found interesting, or the ones that were repeated several times on our social media. But I'm pretty sure that there's some house rules that I forgot, and there's some really good ones out there that I've never seen. So I would love to see any house rules that we got. And the one, I'm gonna pass it on to your guys, but my one takeaway from doing this list and from having this conversation is, I'm gonna ask everybody their one takeaway. My one takeaway is that this reinforces my notion that Cypher System is so modular that it's really hard to break. You know, we touched on a lot of different changes of mechanics, and I don't think any one of these house rules is so game breaking that it would change the way the system is run or the way the game is played. So house rule it up. That's my end thing, because it's going to be very hard to break this system unless you actively trying to.
Yeah, I think that's a very good. Yeah,
I'd have to agree with Anthony in that respect. I don't think anything that we put up here is breaking. I mean, there was like the one rule I believe we all said we kind of wouldn't use, but doesn't mean we wouldn't play at the table with it. And that goes for everything off here. You know, I've played with a lot of different GMs, and I've experienced a lot of different takes on interpretations and so on and so forth. And I'll be honest with you, Cypher System has not let me down. I've been happy. You know, that plug and play aspect of the game, you know, holds, and it holds up well, and it holds up to just about anything. So I'm definitely of the mind to agree with you on that one.
and yeah, like our good buddy Cypher Jack said in the chat there, house rule it up, but keep genre and feel of setting in mind, because they definitely can adjust how things feel. But yeah, definitely. what Anthony said before is 100% accurate. Like, it's so hard to break Cypher System unless you're actively trying to do so. Shoot for the moon with these house rules. Try stuff out, and in the worst case scenario, you just don't use it again.
And our good friend Infinite Construct Claire said recovery roll order can be complicated if the game focuses on resource management. And you're right, absolutely. We'll agree with that too, Claire. I mean, like I said, campaigns will probably allow recovery. I will probably push recovery rolls to be handled in order because you have the time for it to be effective. But, you know, shorter games, something that's going to run 1 or 2 sessions, I probably won't be, you know, especially if it's supposed to be consecutive time that's taking place in those sessions. I probably, you know, wouldn't worry too much about that order. But, you know.
Oh, Dean, I saw the message you said. There's this rule, right, that we didn't mention. I want to say who suggested it, but I absolutely hated this house rule.
Me too.
Just asked me in chat if I should bring it up. So check this house rule out and tell me if I'm bugging, like chat. But
I don't think you talked to me about it, so I'm excited to hear what this is.
And I want chat to chime in. Somebody told me that their house rule was that a player are only allowed to talk while the GM is talking unless they're willing to give up 1 XP to interrupt the GM while he's monologuing. I hated that house rule. I didn't want to put it on the list because I didn't want to get into an argument about how much I hated it. I don't know.
So far, the chat is going, no.
The reason why I hate it is because part of my enjoyment of playing role-playing games is bullshitting with your friends at a table. So if you're turning your role-playing game into a school-like structure that only speak when spoken to, and the teacher has the almighty, you know, like ruler to tell you to shut up, that's not a game I want to play in. So right. I think it takes away the fun. I wouldn't want to be in that game.
I don't want to play a game.
I don't
want to play a game that I have to spend XP in order to be my character. That doesn't make sense because, you know, we've played how many different games and I had the bad guy monologuing and one of you guys decide to interrupt it. Or, you know,
that's part of dialogue.
Right. And that's part of the dialogue. You interrupt and then, you know, it'll trigger something else. It's like, again, it's like you and I having a conversation. It's like you and me, you know, if we're going back and forth about something. So I think that works.
I will say this, right? So and this is just to offer another view of this, I guess, right? So I did see someone mention this specific rule, but they mentioned it specifically for a villain's monologue, right? If you want to interrupt the villain's monologue, the BBE evil guy's monologue, you have to spend an XP to do so, right? And again, that's kind of weird, right? It's kind of weird. But I will say this. It kind of makes sense for some settings and some kind of games you might be playing, because if you watch a movie or a media or something, these villains sometimes do not get interrupted. They get to have their piece. And if you're trying to go for that feel, again, I'm not saying that I would do this, you would want your villain to have their uninterrupted monologue, right? Again, it depends on what kind of game. It's very specific kind of setting.
You could do that same thing. I'm monologuing as the ultimate villain, and someone interrupts me and I'll go, "Shut up, young man, I'm talking." And then I'll continue my monologue. You can do that as a character. You don't have to, like, I don't like rules. I don't like rules for the sake of I'm controlling.
Right, and believe it or not, what Anthony is saying has even been done in movies.
Yeah.
Look at Guardians of the Galaxy. The first Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, Ronan the Accuser is monologuing, and Star-Lord is like, "Really, dude?" And then he's like, "What?" And then he goes back into his monologue, you know? So it's, you know, I mean,
yeah, that's more like, if your complaint for using this rule is that people, all right, this is, I don't want to sound rude or anything, but if your complaint, right, You know, I keep it real. If your complaint is that people keep on interrupting while you're talking as a GM, that's a deficiency on the GM. That's not a need to create a rule to you know, that's the GM either
Not being interesting.
or not even not being interesting, not being social enough with his table for them to give you the courtesy to allow you to speak, right? You know, so I don't want rules that have to confine. Like, you play a role-playing game to have fun. I don't play a role-playing game to be told what to do, like, you know, constantly. Like, I don't know.
I'm with Infinite Construct. I'm with you, Anthony. Like we all said, Infinite Construct said using XP to control the game table is weird. Mm-hmm. Jason said, I don't want to have to spend XP, for an intrusion, intrusion on the GM and stuff.
Dialogue is supposed to be organic, right?
Right.
And if you instituting a mechanic to remove the back and forth flow of the narrative between the players, you're taking away the organic feel of dialogue.
And like I said, even Jason, I remember the game we played with Jason. That was awesome because remember he had the guy that was drinking, and he would run off on a tangent about stuff that he was talking about. Then we'd interrupt him and they'd get to move forward. So personally, this rule, not for me.
Yeah, before we wrap up here,
I brought it up because we were talking about it off street.
Yeah, and again, before we wrap up or move on, I will say, just for perfect clarity, this is not something I would ever do.
It's an XP. I have to interrupt you.
It's something I would never ever do in my games. I was just trying to wrap my head around the perspective. Oh, him with the Cypher Unlimited XP. There we go. But yeah, I think that's a nice wrap up to have a good little laugh about a kind of a funny house rule there. And yeah, just to keep.
I hope the person that submitted it is no longer a fan because we didn't mean it in that way. But we got to keep it real. If we don't like it, we have to talk about it.
We're gonna tell the truth. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Nothing personal.
There's nothing personal about it, though. Yeah. But yeah, this has been a pretty good talk.
Well, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up. Then I'm gonna say goodnight to everybody and everybody in the chat. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Thanks for chatting with us. This has been great. It's awesome. I enjoyed myself immensely. And then I'm gonna throw the ball over to Anthony and let him, do his Meadowlark Lemon routine here and, talk to the world.
If you like us and you like what we do, be sure to join the Cypher Unlimited Discord. It's the largest fan-run Discord things for all things Monty Cook games. The games and conversations being had at all hours of the day and all the time. Not a fan of Discord, join our Facebook group. Not as big as a Discord, but there's still plenty of great discussions to be had there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, of course. If you ever miss this show on Twitch, we always upload it on YouTube the day after, so you can catch it tomorrow on YouTube. We're trying to get 1,000 subscribers there, so we really appreciate it if you head over on the YouTube channel and subscribe there, or give us a follow or subscribe here on Twitch as well. We really appreciate that. If you want to support us in a little way financially, you could always give us a donation on Ko-fi. Our videos are always free, but it helps us out with little things like Zoom calls. Buy some merch at the Cypher Unlimited merch store. We have hats, mugs, notebooks, capes, all in the works. Show to see you some love and support there at the same time. And last but not least, we love you guys.
And yeah, thank you guys so much for stopping by, hanging out with us. Definitely an interesting conversation about this top 10 list here. Yeah, it's definitely got some insight on some things I'd never thought about before. So hopefully you guys did as well. But yeah, that'll do it for us here. So from us at the CU, we will see you later.